All right, guys, welcome. So what I've noticed is that there has been some feedback on the content that I've produced last year. And so I noticed that I left a lot of the viewers hanging, and there is a significant interest, I know, from the online community as well as from the comments on this video, to go to the next level, which is to have a look at the raw data and to have a look at reporting. So based on this information that I was doing online, there won't be an application of this in the field, because it's only for demonstration purposes. So moving forward, I'll be using information I have at my work, and so in that case, the next video will look at a tool that I created, or a research model that I created for the monitoring and research team that we have. And what exactly the point of it is that they wanted to do like some wildlife observations in the field. So they have that component as well. They're doing a bit of fuel logging and tracking, so the disbursement of the fuel and the logging of the daily trips. The type of monitoring, so like just to get an idea of the monitoring, so we're grouping the monitorings based on different types they do. They do quite a number, and also I made it in such a way that if they're doing any sort of type of wildlife recovery and necropsy, they can also use this tool. So it's more or less just tracking their field activity. Second to that, they're doing like their dive site logging. So at each dive site, there's some information to collect, such as the type of dive they're doing, if it's for the conch surveys or the sea cucumber surveys, the divers, a bit of information on the physical elements, the wave, the cloud, and of course there's a post dive data that they're also doing. From my feedback from the research, or the biologist, he spoke that he wanted a few more information, such as what I've noticed in the comments is that he's putting the dive site data in the comments, or as in the name of the dive site. I have those fixed already, so at some point I need to create that attribute. So in that case, I'll do it's a new attribute, so I'm not getting one from what I've done before. It's going to be a list, since it's fixed, and then I'll need to make that list. So this is going to be dive site name. So there's quite a number of them, and so in this case I'll just add to this list, and then he'll be using that information in this. From that, it'll also be added here, as that's going to be how these two data link together by that dive site name. It's not really a unique ID, but they only visit one dive site for trip. So like they might visit the trip the dive site multiple times in a month, but it's going to be for different types of surveys, and so there's no problem in having them use the same name, or we don't really need a unique ID for that site at this point. And then in the case of the post dive data, we'll only do the same dive site name, and it'll work for both. So, and there's no need to go in there and redo that. The other thing he requested was some other physical elements. For instance, there were some like dive logging that they need to do, and so he mentioned that he'd give me that at some point, and so I'll also add this to this list. But for now, that's the only change I wanted to make. Of course, the configurable data model, that's going to have to be added in, and sometimes by default it's added. I'm not sure. There it is. It's already added, but maybe the order in which he does it, I can put it up on the top. In the case of the divers, right now he's using text, I'll get a list of names from him, and then we will be using that list. Because for me, my objective in adding fields is I want them to do as limited typing using this form of data entry as possible. I want them to just be clicking, click, 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 or tap, tap, tap. And that makes the whole process easier in the field because they don't have to be typing anything out. And I think that's what you should aim for in general. Also, errors. By having a pre-configured list, there's less errors, right? So that's also another reason why. And then when it comes to the querying of the information, you pick on those pre-configured names or whatever, and then you can do queries based on that. But this is more or less his field data that he's doing out. So this particular one, let's just go through it a little bit. This is a post-close season survey that he did. This is for the conch. So he's doing conch monitoring, and then this is a post-close season survey. So there's an opening and closing of the season, and then when the season closed, this year was closed due to the quota that they set out. It exceeded that quota, and so now he doing the survey after the closing of that season. There's only one individual here, and that's him. So I don't have the captain's name. He uses like a bunch of different captains. And then he has in the comment section the researchers on that trip, including himself. And then of course you have the type of transportation. In the case of the listing of these boats, it's important because in terms of the fuel, you'll be able to know why the trip is burning a certain type of fuel, certain quantity of fuel based on the type of boat it is. This particular boat has 2 engines. So there's 2 100 horsepower engines on this boat, and it has a different profile as opposed to another double engine boat we have. So it's important to know what boat they're using, and then if you're doing more advanced analysis, it'll have a factor in that. And then of course he's taking off from our headquarters here at Tide, and he's returning back to the same headquarters in the same day. For this particular activity, he left at about 8:20 and returned about 3:30. And they traveled a total distance of 146 kilometers for a total time out at sea for 7 hours. And then these are the observations he did. So just to look at these observations quickly. So he didn't do the pre-monitoring observation that I told him to do, which is to enter the type of survey, which is this particular one right here. So here he's supposed to enter before he reaches at the dive site, right? Before he reaches at the dive site, I want him to enter this information. And this tells me the type of survey for this particular day that they're doing. And it's the conch survey, and it's not post-conch. I did this one manually. So I just want to update this observation. So it's not post-conch survey, it's post-season. And then it already has the conch survey, so it's just post-season survey. And then you update that observation, and that'll be saved in the report. But that's all I want him to do. Yeah. So he would do that as they're taking off, and at the end here he would put the amount of fuel they consume for that particular day, which he didn't. So yeah, those are just 2 corrections that he'll have to work through to improve the quality of the data. But as you can see, he's doing pre and post dive data entry. For some of them he missed. So if you notice, there's only post dive data here, and then there's a pre, post, pre, but it should be pre-post as this one. And then from that you can tell, for here you can tell that this dive took about maybe about 40 minutes at most. And then you have the start and stop of the dive, where they picked up the divers and where they dropped them off. And then this is generally the route they took, right? In the case of this base map, this is the general base map, so it has all of them, but I can go to my base map section here, and I can use as session default a particular base map. So I'll select a base map to use, and I'll put conch, and I'll use a session default, and I'll load that, right? And then when I go into my patrols, and I open up this particular patrol that we're looking at, and I go back to the view trucks, I'll only see my conch dive sites in there. So as you notice, he visited these particular sites that you see labeled off. Marlon Bank. This one's Seal Key. Maybe they went for a lunch or something at that particular one. Dale Bank, Copper Bank, Byron Bank. And then maybe they did one at Punta Gorda or whatever. But you can tell based on the observations. So if we go to the map, you'll see the observations in the field as these boxes. So we can tell, what sites they're visiting. Again, this one's not using the correct, so we need to load it as the conch. Use a session default. And then there it is. So these are where he did the different dives. He did 4 dives for this particular day. And then he traveled back along the coast. Right? Yeah. I guess they probably did a dive here as well. So that needs to be added in at some point. This one's Seal Key, so I guess they need to add that in. And then he'd return back to the tide. And that's more or less it for this particular trip that he did. And in general, if there's more information in your data model, then you can look at that information as well. In the case of this particular trip, you notice there's an error. So this dive actually ended about 4:30, but he told me that he took the device home and then it was recording all the while. And I already did that delete, but I didn't delete the second day. So I need to come in here because this only lasted 1 day. And then I'll come in and I delete that second day. So I'll put it to 6. Now, when you do this, if there's no relevant information in the previous one, it's fine because you'll lose that information. So it'll ask you if you're sure you want to delete it. And for me, I'm sure that I want to delete it because I know there's no relevant information in that second day. So I hit yes. And then it's made that change. Notice that start time and end time has shifted. So I need to come in here and update the start times. Generally, sometimes this don't work. So you need to come inside and manually do it. So it has for 15. 15 is about 3:30. It made it based on this. So you actually have the truck, which can tell you when it started, about 8:55 a.m. So you can put that as your first start time. And then your final start time is 4:30 or 4:31. Round this up. So 8:55 to 4:31 is what I'll enter up there. That's 8. And 4 is 16 in this case, and that's 30. Or 31. Right? And then that's the official time for that particular activity that he did. Right? He said it did a 31 rest minutes. Not sure where he got that from. Maybe from the stop they did at that particular key, or for whatever reason. He maybe paused the patrol or something. But we'll just ignore that for now. But yeah, that's just one error that you may encounter from time to time with having that second day where there's actually no observation. That's how you delete it. All right, that's good. So that's what the raw data looks like. From that, you generate your queries, which is the next step. So in the next step, I have had some queries that I've generated. In the case of the fuel disperse, all I'm doing is I'm just creating a general query, so a query, new query, and then it's an observation query that I'm using here. And then it's just this fuel disperse. You come into the side. Here's the data model filters. And then you go down to the fuel disperse. And then you can click on something individually if that's what you're interested in. For me, I'm just clicking on this 2 times. And then it gets added down here, right? I don't need to. And then you run that query for the dates. And then this is your raw data for fuel dispersed in my case. So there's 120, 135, etc. Then you've sorted by date, June 4th, July 4th. That's for that last trip in terms of his conch survey. He was given 135 gallons to conduct that over those multiple days. with this information, you can export it if you're interested in that. You can export the results as shapefile, XML, or CSV. CSV and shapefile are the two most important ones for me. If I want to do some aggregating of the data using Excel, then I'll use the CSV. If I want to look at GIS, then I'll do that. General, for my big annual reports, I want to make the maps using ArcGIS, and then I would use the shapefile for that, as opposed to generating in Smart. I can just make a better map using ArcGIS as opposed to the map generated using Smart. So that's why I would use the shapefile. In the case of the CSV, it's for aggregating data. And then again, I make better tables using Excel as opposed to the one generated from Smart again. You can do more formatting in Excel and have it to look a bit better. And so that's one reason why I would go to Excel for that and use the CSV. But yeah, for me, all I'm interested in this data is the fuel dispersed, the quantity, and the funder, and then the date. So when I create a table using my report, I'll just do those three. All right? And when you're creating your queries, it's important to know how you're going to be using the data. In the case of the routes, this one's, you want the little one with the line. So query, new query, and then it's patrol queries. And then see, there's this new patrol query, one with the line. And then you'll come with a blank. And then you can run it blankly, like that. And then that's your data. But the difference is that you don't have a point, you have the lines. Right? And that's what I'm interested in here. Interested in those lines for the map. And it has some of your general data, as you can see. But I only want it for the line. I can also use it for just listing out the different patrol IDs, the dates, etc. The number of, because these are like number of trips. And I can make like a column with some of this information as well. And then generally that's that. The second one is this monitoring type details. It's just the same observation I did previously. I'm sorry, the same query I did previously. It's such a general query, new query, all data queries, new observation. And what I did was I came into the categories and I picked research and monitoring, and I put type of query, type of monitoring conducted. And then you have this information. So that's the same one that I showed you for the post and Kong survey, etc. that I entered. Right? Yeah. That's that. Pre and post dive data. I did both of them. So it's the same thing, but I did it for both details, pre and post dive details. You can just double click this and that would be fine as well, but I just did it that way. Maybe at some point I added something else, and then I was only be interested in that and supposed to maybe the third one that I would have created. But if you notice, I hit R, and I like to use OR because I get both data. Sometimes they have to be logged together in the same observation, and if it's not logged together, then it won't come out. So it's important to you to put or to differentiate between both. So like if I did and, there would be nothing because none of them are tied together. They weren't made together at the same point. And so with or, they were made separately as separate observations. And so that's why they come out like this. But if I did and, they have to be tied together in the patrol itself. At least that's how I think it works. You guys can play with that and figure it out eventually. The final one is the wildlife observation. It's the same thing, but I just did it for flora and fauna observations, and I want all of this information. So that's just generally what I did. They've only made 2 observations: manatee hawksbill traveling, and they were unsure of the behavior of this manatee, not sure what it was doing. And then it's just manatee sighting, 30-inch length, the turtle that is observed, hawksbill. And then there was just not one number in a group. And then this is number of adults. right? If there was 3 in the group and there's just 2 adults, then you know that third one can probably be a calf or something. In case of the turtle, that's unlikely to be true, but for the manatee, that would be how you would interpret the data, that there's 1 calf in that group of 3. And if you notice, these were made not during the patrol itself, but you know, they did this observation separately using the independent incident observations. That's like, if you have the smart device on you, it's good to have this available so that you know you can make observations while you're not on patrol, just random observations that are unrelated to the patrol itself. In this case, I'm using the word patrol, but we do know that I'm referring to a survey trip. And generally, that's how you do the queries in the most basic sense. There is another type of query that you can do if you're doing patrols itself, like the actual patrols. And for that query, it's called gridded query. So you're going to do a patrol grid query. All right. In the case of the gridded query, we're just doing number of patrols, right? And then you can run it as is and see what the grid looks like. And the grid is the size of the cells. So you get these values, and then you get this grid, right? For me, this would be too fine if I'm doing analysis on this entire patrol area. So I would want to increase that. So I'll try 0.05 to see what that looks like. See? A bit better, maybe too big for some. But you can see that they've moved in this area more often than they've moved in other areas. And what I try to do is I would go into the layers and I would format this style. So here I'll format this style to maybe like 100, not really 100, but above a certain threshold. That's meaningful to me. So for instance, the opacity, sorry, that's just the opacity. And then the value itself, I would want a value that's meaningful. So like if there's a week of data, what's a meaningful value in that week in terms of like passing over a particular, for instance, if my rangers are doing 20 patrols in a week, right? How much times would I want them to hit a particular target in that week? You know, so if it's 5, I'd like them to visit every single area in the reserve 5 times. Then it's good to have my maximum value at around 5, so that I don't put something unrealistic like the 20. In this case, it's 10. So 10 is the max value. But that's too high. My rangers will never meet all targets 20 times because they've only done 20 patrols. So 5 would be an ideal number in that case. And so for this case, let's just use 2 or 5, as I mentioned. And then it's not red. Maybe I want this color to be a green, nice green color, right? In the case that the 0 value is fine. And then, this value can be about maybe 2. And then instead of white, I'll put it as the red. Or I can use an orange or whatever, right? And then finally, this last color is white. And then it has a negative value of that, but it's like no data. There's no data, so that's fine. But I can add like a white or another color before, like a red, for 1. So I can add. This will be 1, and then this is an actual white, and it's 50%. So he'll go first, the white, or I can change it to the red in this case, then the orange, and then the green. Apply that, okay. And that's what it looks like. It does a transition. So if you notice, these areas have been visited more or less 5 times, so these are doing good. This area is also visited 5 times, so that's pretty good. And then the other areas are less than 5, so they need to do more patrols in this area, as an example. And all of these other areas, there's no data. And that's how you use this query. you can quickly look at it and say, hey guys, you're not visiting the coastline between these particular rivers, and that's as opposed to looking on a bunch of lines. For this case, with this research team, it's not relevant, but when you're doing with actual patrols, that's how you can look at that, as opposed to just looking at these lines here. Okay. All right. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to show you there, and I think that's fine for now, and for the chorus section at least. Anyways, I think that's it for today, guys. I won't go into the reports. I think that was quite a number of things we talked about, and so I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. So I hope you guys enjoyed, but that's it for me. Thanks.